The sky burned with fire as Ethan Cole's fighter spiraled toward the alien planet below. His ship had taken a direct hit, and now gravity was doing the rest. Smoke filled the cockpit, alarms screamed in his ears, and the ground was rushing up fast. Come on, just a little more. Ethan yanked the controls, trying to slow the descent. His heart pounded as he braced for impact. The crash was violent. Metal groaned, trees shattered, and the ship skidded across the rocky surface before slamming into a cliffside. For a moment, everything was still. Then, pain shot through Ethan's body. His vision blurred, but he was alive. Barely. He tried to move, but his leg was trapped under debris. Blood trickled down his forehead. His breathing was ragged. Outside, strange creatures screeched in the distance. This was Varkanis 4, a hostile world known for its deadly wildlife. If the crash didn't kill him, the planet would. Ethan reached for his emergency beacon. Dead. No signal. No rescue. He was completely alone. Then he heard something, a low growl. His blood ran cold. Through the shattered cockpit glass, he saw movement. A massive beast, its body covered in dark, armored scales, stalked toward him. Its glowing yellow eyes locked onto him, hungry and predatory. Just my luck, Ethan muttered. He reached for his sidearm, but his fingers were numb. He tried again. Too slow. The creature lunged. A flash of silver. A blur of motion. The beast shrieked, its body twisting midair as something struck it. A figure landed between Ethan and the monster, tall, cloaked, and holding a blade that shimmered in the dim light. With a single fluid motion, the figure drove the blade into the beast's throat. The creature collapsed, twitching before it went still. Ethan blinked. His rescuer turned, pulling back their hood. A woman. No, not human. Her skin was a deep shade of violet, her golden eyes sharp and intelligent. Intricate markings ran along her cheekbones, symbols of royalty. A Varkanian. Ethan knew her face. He had seen it on war reports. "Your Princess Zisha," he breathed. The alien princess looked at him with unreadable eyes. Then, with an air of cold authority, she said, "You are lucky I found you, human. But I did not save you out of kindness. I need something in return." Ethan frowned. He was in no position to refuse, but something about her tone sent a chill down his spine. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Zisha's golden eyes locked onto his. "I need you to kill my father." Ethan Cole lay on a soft bed, his body aching but alive. He blinked at the high ceiling, decorated with glowing symbols. The air smelled clean, unlike the smoke and blood from his crash. Soft silk sheets covered him, but he felt like a prisoner. His mind replayed the last thing he remembered. Princess Zisha, the Varkanian royal, saving him and asking him to kill her father. Even injured, Ethan knew one thing. This was trouble. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Zisha entered, dressed in a flowing silver robe, her golden eyes watching him with cold interest. "You are awake," she said. Ethan pushed himself up, wincing. "Yeah, and I remember what you asked me. You want me to kill your father, the Emperor. Why me?" Zisha moved closer, standing tall. "Because humans are different. You do not break under pressure. You do not surrender. My people fear my father, but a human, you would fight him, even against impossible odds." Ethan let out a dry laugh. "You don't know much about me, princess. I'm a pilot, not an assassin." Zisha's expression didn't change. "And yet you are a survivor. That is why you are here." Ethan frowned and looked around. The room was luxurious, far too elegant for a prisoner. Yet, deep down, he knew he wasn't free. Where exactly is here? "You are in my palace, far from the Emperor's eyes. For now, you are safe. But if my father learns of you, you will not live to see another day." Ethan exhaled. "Let me guess. If I say no, you hand me over to him." Zisha tilted her head slightly. No. If you say no, I will return you to the wastelands. Alone. No weapons. No food. I do not kill without reason, but I cannot protect you forever. Ethan clenched his fists. She wasn't threatening him. She was just stating facts. This wasn't a choice. It was survival. He took a deep breath. Why do you want your father dead? For the first time, something flickered in Zisha's eyes. Anger? Fear? Pain? Because he will destroy everything, she said, her voice quieter. He plans to attack your people. He believes humans are a disease that must be wiped out before you become too strong. He will bring war to your kind, and my kind will suffer for it. Ethan's heart pounded. A war against humanity. The Varkanian Empire was powerful, but humans had never been ones to roll over and die. If this war happened, it wouldn't just be a battle. It would be a massacre on both sides. Ethan rubbed his face. You're asking me to start a war to stop a war. Zisha stepped closer. No. I am asking you to end one before it begins. Ethan looked into her golden eyes and saw something unexpected. Desperation. He was running out of options, and for the first time, he wasn't sure what to do. Ethan's mind raced as Zisha spoke. Each word she said painted a picture of an empire on the edge of destruction, and at the center of it all, the emperor, her father, the man she had once admired, now the source of all the chaos. Zisha stood by the window, her back straight, staring out at the foreign landscape. The sun was setting over the barren hills of Varkanis IV, casting long shadows across the palace grounds. Ethan could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He wasn't just dealing with a political struggle. This was a fight for survival. You say your father is planning to attack humanity, Ethan said slowly, trying to wrap his head around it. But why now? Why hasn't he done it before? Zisha turned to face him, her eyes filled with a strange mixture of sadness and determination. Because my father believed the time wasn't right. He needed to build his power, crush any opposition. But he has watched your species grow. The human colonies have spread too far. The Emperor sees your potential, and he fears it. If he waits too long, your people will become too powerful to stop. Ethan's chest tightened as the truth sank in. He's planning a full-scale invasion. Zisha nodded, her face grim. Yes, he believes if he destroys humanity now, he will secure Varkanis IV's future, and he will hold complete control over this galaxy. Ethan shook his head. That's insane. The Varkanian Empire is powerful, but if they come after humanity, they'll face resistance like they've never seen before. This will turn into an all-out war, and everyone loses. Zisha lowered her gaze, almost as if she was afraid of hearing the truth. I know. That is why I must stop him. Ethan glanced around the room. The walls were covered in luxurious tapestries, and the floors were made of gleaming stone. This was a place of royalty, a place of power, but it felt hollow now, like a house built on lies and fear. And you think killing him will stop all of this? Ethan asked, his voice skeptical. Zisha's eyes flashed with emotion. Not kill, but overthrow him. Expose his crimes. The empire is split. Many noble houses are tired of his tyranny, but they fear speaking out. If we can rally them to our side, if we can prove that my father's war would destroy everything, we might have a chance to change the future. Ethan rubbed his chin, deep in thought. He had fought in wars, seen the destruction they caused. But this was different. There was no clear enemy. There was no honor in the fight. It wasn't a battle of soldiers. It was a battle for control, for the future of two species. You're asking me to help you start a revolution. That's not something you can do with a few words and a sword. Zisha's eyes softened, just for a moment. I am asking you to help me lead it. Humans have something my people do not. The strength to stand when everything is against you. The will to fight even when the odds are impossible. Ethan met her gaze. Her words were true, and a part of him felt the fire inside him stirring again. He wasn't some pawn in a game of royalty. But this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about changing the fate of two worlds. "And if we fail?" Ethan asked quietly. Zisha's voice hardened. "If we fail, then my father will start the war, and millions will die, including your people." Ethan took a deep breath. He couldn't back down from this now. The stakes were too high. "Then we fight," he said. "But we do it my way." Zisha nodded. "And what is your way?" Ethan smiled grimly. "We play by their rules, then break them." The beginning of a plan formed in his mind. It wasn't going to be easy, but they didn't have time for easy. If this was to work, they needed every advantage they could get, and Ethan was going to make sure they had one. It was time to turn the tables. The air in the Emperor's chamber was thick with tension. The room was vast, with high vaulted ceilings and walls adorned with golden tapestries, depicting scenes of war and conquest. At the center of it all was a massive throne made of obsidian, its dark surface gleaming in the dim light. Ethan's eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail. There were no guards in sight, but he knew better than to assume it was safe. The Emperor was not a man to be caught off guard. Zisha moved silently beside him, her steps soft but purposeful. She didn't speak, but her body language told Ethan everything he needed to know. She was focused, determined, and ready for whatever came next. "We have to find him quickly," she whispered, her voice low. "Once my father knows we're here, he'll have every guard in the palace after us." Ethan nodded, his eyes darting around the room. The Emperor's chambers were built like a fortress, but there was one thing he noticed. There was a door on the far side of the room that looked different from the others. Smaller, less ornate. "That door," he said quietly, pointing. "It leads somewhere important." Zisha's gaze followed his finger. "You're right. That leads to the Emperor's private study. If we can get to him, we may have a chance to stop everything." They moved toward the door, careful not to make a sound. As they approached, Ethan's instincts screamed that something wasn't right. He glanced at Zisha, whose expression had darkened. She, too, had felt it. The change in the air. "Stay alert," Ethan whispered. Without warning, the door to the private study opened. A tall figure stepped out, draped in black robes, with a sharp, angular face that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. It was the Emperor's personal advisor, a man known for his ruthless efficiency. "You should not have come here," the advisor said in a cold, smooth voice. "The Emperor knows you are here, Princess. He is waiting for you." Zisha froze, but Ethan didn't hesitate. He reached for his blaster, but before he could draw it, the advisor moved with lightning speed, throwing something at the floor. A cloud of smoke exploded in the air, enveloping the room. Ethan's heart raced as he coughed, trying to clear his vision. His hand gripped his blaster, but the smoke made it hard to see. "We have to move," he shouted, grabbing Zisha's arm. But Zisha was already ahead of him. She darted through the smoke, her movements fluid and precise. "Follow me," she called out, her voice cutting through the chaos. Ethan pushed forward, trusting her to lead the way. The smoke began to clear, and they found themselves in a narrow hallway. The sounds of footsteps and shouts echoed from behind them. The palace was awake now. "We need to get to the Emperor's chambers, now," Zisha urged. Ethan followed her, every step taking them closer to their goal, and closer to the danger that awaited them. As they approached a set of ornate doors, Ethan's heart hammered in his chest. They were just moments away from facing the Emperor, the man who had the power to change everything. Would they succeed? Or would they become prisoners in the very palace they were trying to destroy? The door slid open, and there he was, the Emperor. Ethan stood by the window, his eyes scanning the strange world of Arcanus IV. The planet was harsh, covered in vast deserts and rocky mountains, with an air that felt like it was always on the brink of a storm. It mirrored the situation he found himself in, unstable, dangerous, and unpredictable. Beside him, Zisha watched the horizon, her expression distant. There was something in her posture, something in the way she held herself, that made Ethan realize how much she had been through. She wasn't just a princess in a palace, she was a warrior. "You don't understand," Zisha said, her voice low. "My people, we are not like you." Ethan turned to her. "What do you mean?" Zisha's golden eyes flickered with emotion, but she quickly masked it. "You humans, you fight like there's no end. You face impossible odds and still push forward. We, the Varkanians, break. When the pressure gets too much, we bend. We do not fight like you do. We do not endure." Ethan frowned, confused. "But you've survived for centuries. You're strong." She shook her head. "We are strong, yes, but only in physical might. Emotionally, we are fragile. My father, the Emperor, is proof of that. He controls with fear because he cannot control his own people's emotions. He is a king in name only. If he were truly a leader, he would rule with trust, not terror." Ethan studied her carefully. "But you're different, aren't you? You're not afraid to fight. You're not like him." Zisha didn't respond immediately. She only looked out at the distant hills. Ethan could see the weight of her thoughts pressing down on her. "You're right," she finally said. "I am different. I know what my father is capable of, but I can't be like him. I refuse to rule with fear." Ethan stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "So why don't you just take over? Why not become the ruler of Varkanis for yourself? You have the strength, Zisha. You have the will." Her eyes snapped to his, sharp and intense. "Because I am not my father. I will not rule through bloodshed. That is what makes us different. You, human, you fight not for power, but for survival. For your family. For your friends. You don't give up, no matter what." Ethan felt a pang in his chest. The way she spoke, it was like she understood something about him that even he didn't. "I'm not a hero," he muttered. "I don't fight for glory or for some grand cause. I fight because I have to. I fight because if I don't, I won't survive. And neither will anyone I care about." Zisha's gaze softened, a small smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "That is the difference, Ethan. That is why I need you. Humans fight for what matters to them. For the ones they love. We fight for our own survival. But sometimes survival is not enough." Ethan didn't know how to respond. He wasn't a man of deep speeches or noble causes. He was a fighter. He didn't think about why he fought. He just did it. But hearing Zisha speak like that, it made him feel like there was something bigger at stake here. "I don't know if I can kill your father," Ethan said quietly. "But I'll help you. I'll help you stop him." Zisha's eyes brightened with a spark of hope. "Then let us start, Ethan. Together." And in that moment, Ethan realized something. This wasn't just about stopping an emperor. This was about proving that humanity, no matter how small in the grand scheme of things, could face impossible odds and still rise. No matter what. The night was darker than usual on Varkanis 4. The moons were hidden behind thick clouds, casting the land in a blanket of shadows. Ethan stood at the edge of the palace courtyard, his breath steady as he waited for Zisha. His heart was pounding, but he didn't show it. He had been in tough situations before, but this felt different. This wasn't just a mission, it was a gamble. Zisha appeared from the shadows, her silver robe blending perfectly with the night. Her face was serious, determined, and almost unreadable. She moved toward him with the grace of a predator, every step calculated and quiet. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Ethan nodded, tightening the straps on his black armor. It was light, flexible, designed for speed and stealth. He checked the small blaster holstered at his side. "Ready as I'll ever be." Zisha turned to the dark entrance of the palace, her eyes scanning the surroundings. "We must move quickly. If we are spotted, everything will fall apart." Ethan followed her lead as they slipped through the palace gates. The guards were distracted, facing the opposite direction, unaware of the intruders. The air was tense, the quiet only broken by their soft footsteps on the stone. The underground tunnels were just ahead. They had chosen this route because it was the least guarded. The stone walls were damp, and the air smelled of ancient dust. Ethan's mind raced. They had to reach the inner chambers of the palace undetected, find the Emperor, and somehow stop him from launching his war. If they failed, both humans and Varkanians would pay the price. Zisha led the way, her movements fluid and silent. She was in her element here, navigating the dark corridors like she had walked them 1,000 times. Ethan admired her focus, but he couldn't help but wonder, was she truly ready to face her father, the man she once worshipped? They reached the first checkpoint without incident, a small, dimly lit room with a single guard standing watch. Ethan motioned to Zisha, and she nodded, stepping silently behind the guard. In one smooth movement, she incapacitated him with a pressure point technique, gently lowering his body to the floor. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "I didn't know you were trained in hand-to-hand combat." Zisha stood up, brushing her hands off. "I am. You cannot survive in this palace without knowing how to defend yourself." Ethan didn't press further. They had no time for questions. They had to keep moving. The tunnel seemed endless, twisting and turning with no clear direction. Ethan's sense of time began to blur. He didn't know how long they had been walking, but the silence was making him uneasy. Every corner could hide a threat. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached a large, reinforced door. Zisha looked at Ethan, her eyes narrowing. "This is it. The Emperor's chambers are beyond this door." Ethan could feel the weight of the moment. Everything they had done led up to this. One wrong move, and they would be caught. His pulse quickened, but his face remained calm. He could do this. "Ready?" Zisha asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded. "Let's finish this." With a quiet hiss, the door slid open, and they stepped into the heart of the beast. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, running a hand through his messy hair. His body still ached from the crash, but his mind was sharp now. Zisha's request echoed in his head. Kill the Emperor. It was madness. He looked up at the alien princess, her golden eyes filled with cold determination. She stood tall, waiting for his answer. But Ethan had only one thing to say. "No." Zisha's expression didn't change. "You refuse." Ethan scoffed. "Dan right, I refuse. I'm a soldier, not a killer for hire. I don't assassinate people just because a princess tells me to." Zisha's jaw tightened. "You misunderstand, human. My father is not just a ruler, he is a tyrant. If he lives, millions will die. Your people will die. Do you not care about them?" Ethan clenched his fists. Of course he cared. But what she was asking, it wasn't that simple. "Killing a king doesn't stop a war, princess," he said. "Sometimes it makes things worse." Zisha narrowed her eyes. "So you will do nothing. You will let my father burn your worlds to the ground." Ethan stood up slowly, wincing from the pain in his ribs. "I didn't say that, but I don't trust you." Zisha raised an eyebrow. "You do not have to trust me. You only need to act." Ethan let out a bitter laugh. "That's not how humans work. We don't kill without reason, and we don't take orders from just anyone." Silence filled the room. For the first time, Zisha looked frustrated, maybe even uncertain. Finally, she spoke. "You think I am like my father, that I will use you and throw you away. You are wrong." Ethan folded his arms. "Then prove it. Tell me everything." Zisha hesitated for just a moment. Then she sat down, her shoulders stiff. "I was raised to obey the Emperor, to rule as he does. But I see now that his rule is built on fear, not strength. He believes humans are dangerous because you are different. He does not understand your kind. And what he does not understand, he destroys." Ethan listened carefully. "He believes the only way to protect our empire is to strike first," she continued. Before humans grow too powerful. Before you become a threat. Ethan smirked. Too late for that. We're already a threat. Zisha's lips twitched, almost like she wanted to smile, but she didn't. Then help me stop him, she said. Before he starts a war, no one can win. Ethan exhaled. He was still trapped, still outnumbered, and still didn't trust Zisha. But one thing was clear. If she was telling the truth, humanity was in danger. And Ethan wasn't the kind of man to walk away from a fight. I won't promise anything, he said, but I'll listen. For now, Ethan sat at the long, glass-like table in Zisha's private chamber. A map of the Emperor's palace was projected in the air before him, its glowing lines forming a massive fortress built deep within the mountains of Varkanis IV. Towers, gates, and security checkpoints covered the structure like an iron cage. This place is a death trap, Ethan muttered, studying the layout. Armed guards, surveillance drones, energy shields. You weren't joking when you said your father was paranoid. Zisha, standing beside him, crossed her arms. He does not trust anyone. Even his own advisors are watched constantly. If we make one mistake, we will not get a second chance. Ethan leaned back, rubbing his chin. And you want me to break into this place, sneak past a royal army, and take down the most powerful man in your empire? He let out a dry chuckle. Sounds easy. Zisha gave him a sharp look. You agreed to help, human. Do not tell me you are afraid now. Ethan smirked. I didn't say I was afraid. I said it's impossible. Big difference. Zisha narrowed her golden eyes. Then we must make it possible. Ethan sighed and turned back to the map. All right. We can't fight our way in. We'd be dead before we reached the front gate. We need another way. Zisha tapped the table, zooming in on a section of the fortress. Here, the underground tunnels. They were built as escape routes long ago. My father sealed most of them, but I believe one still remains open. If we can enter through here, we can reach the inner chambers without being seen. Ethan studied the tunnel layout. And what's waiting for us inside? Zisha's expression darkened. Guards. Automated defenses. Possibly my father's personal assassins. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Assassins. Great. I was worried this might be too easy. Zisha ignored his sarcasm. The key to this plan is secrecy. We must not be seen. If we fail, my father will know I betrayed him. If that happens, he will kill us both. Ethan let out a slow breath. No pressure, huh? Zisha tilted her head slightly. I can do this alone if you have changed your mind. Ethan shook his head. Not a chance, princess. If we're doing this, we do it together. A small smile touched Zisha's lips, but it disappeared just as quickly. Then we must prepare. We leave at nightfall. Ethan looked at the map one last time. This was crazy. He had been in dangerous missions before, but sneaking into an alien emperor's palace with a rebellious princess, that was a whole new level of insane. And yet, he felt the familiar fire in his chest, the thrill of the impossible. All right, Zisha, he said, standing up. Let's bring down an empire. The doors slid open with a deep echoing sound. Ethan and Zisha stepped inside, their bodies tense, their eyes locked on the figure seated on the grand obsidian throne, the Emperor of Varkanis IV. He was an imposing figure, tall, broad-shouldered, and draped in flowing black and gold robes. His golden eyes, the same as Zisha's, burned with cold authority. A scar ran down the side of his face, a reminder of the battles he had fought. His presence alone was enough to send a chill through the air. For a moment, there was silence. The Emperor studied them with an unreadable expression, his fingers tapping slowly against the armrest of his throne. So, he finally spoke, his voice deep and commanding. You have returned, daughter. Zisha's fists clenched. Not as your daughter, as your enemy. A small smile played at the Emperor's lips. Enemy. You think because you stand before me with a human by your side, You have the strength to challenge me. His gaze shifted to Ethan. And you, a mere human, you believe you belong in this battle. Ethan smirked, stepping forward. I don't believe anything. I just know that when tyrants like you get too comfortable, it's time for someone to knock them down. The Emperor let out a low chuckle. Brave words. But words do not change the balance of power. He rose from his throne. Instantly, the energy in the room shifted. The air became heavier, charged with an unseen force. Ethan's instincts screamed danger. You disappoint me, Zisha, the Emperor said, his voice quieter now, but more dangerous. I raised you to be strong, to rule alongside me. But instead, you let the weakness of compassion infect you. Zisha took a step forward, her eyes blazing with fury. Compassion is not weakness. It is what makes me different from you. The Emperor's expression darkened. And that is why you will fail. Without warning, he raised his hand. A pulse of energy blasted through the air, knocking Ethan and Zisha backward. Ethan crashed into the floor, the impact rattling his bones. Pain shot through his body, but he forced himself to move. He rolled to the side just as another wave of energy struck where he had been lying a second ago. He's using some kind of kinetic force. Ethan shouted. Zisha was already back on her feet, her body tense. We have to stop him before he gathers more power. Ethan pulled out his blaster and fired, but the Emperor raised his hand, and the shot stopped midair, hovering before vanishing into nothing. The Emperor smirked. Foolish. Then he moved, faster than Ethan had expected. In an instant, he was upon them, striking out with a force that sent Zisha sliding backward. Ethan barely dodged the next attack. He had fought powerful enemies before, but this was something else. The Emperor wasn't just strong, he was unstoppable. But Ethan wasn't about to back down. He gritted his teeth, looking at Zisha. We need a plan. Fast. Zisha wiped blood from her lip, her golden eyes filled with determination. We take him down together. Ethan nodded. Then let's do this. The final battle had begun. The Emperor's golden eyes glowed with raw power as he stepped forward, his black and gold robes billowing from the unseen energy radiating around him. Ethan and Zisha stood side by side, bruised but unbroken. This was it, the final fight. The Emperor lifted his hand, and a wave of force shot toward them like an invisible storm. Ethan dived to the side, rolling across the cold marble floor. Zisha, faster than him, leaped backward, landing gracefully. We can't fight him head-on, Ethan shouted, gripping his blaster. He's too strong. Zisha's mind raced. She knew her father's power came from the energy cores embedded in the palace. The throne room was built to enhance his abilities. If she could disrupt that, we have to destroy the energy sources, she yelled. They're hidden behind the throne. Ethan nodded. I'll handle it. You keep him busy. Zisha didn't hesitate. She rushed toward her father, her movements swift and deadly. She ducked under his next attack and struck out with a precise kick. The Emperor blocked it easily, grabbing her by the wrist and flinging her across the room. She crashed against a pillar but pushed herself up, refusing to give in. You will not win, she growled. The Emperor chuckled. You are no match for me, child. Meanwhile, Ethan sprinted toward the throne. He could see it now, small energy conduits glowing behind the massive obsidian seat. He pulled out a small explosive charge from his belt and slapped it onto the core. Hey, Emperor, Ethan shouted. I got a surprise for you. The Emperor turned just as Ethan pressed the detonator. The charge exploded, sending a shockwave through the room. The lights flickered. The golden glow in the Emperor's eyes dimmed slightly. Zisha saw her chance. She dashed forward, spinning low and sweeping her father's legs from beneath him. The mighty Emperor of Arcanis IV crashed to the floor. Ethan wasted no time. He aimed his blaster and fired. The shot struck the Emperor in the shoulder, making him roar in pain. You think this is over? The Emperor hissed, rising again, but his movements were slower now. I am still your ruler. I am still. Zisha didn't let him finish. She took a deep breath, then struck her father's chest with both hands, using a technique only she knew. A pulse of energy erupted from her palms, sending the Emperor flying backward. He slammed against the shattered throne, his breath ragged. For the first time, fear flickered in his eyes. "It's over, father," Zisha said, her voice steady. "Your rule ends today." The Emperor tried to rise, but his strength was gone. He slumped against the broken throne, defeated. Ethan lowered his blaster. "Looks like the Empire just got new leadership." Zisha turned to him, a small, tired smile on her lips. Not an empire. A new beginning. The battle was over. The war had been prevented. And together, a human and an alien princess had changed the fate of an entire world.